Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem for OGN. Today we're going to be discussing a case which should have a lot more people talking about it than actually are. And that is the case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, who was convicted for a murder of a police officer dating back to 2000. There are a lot of facts about this case that are just not matching up. And we're here to try to discuss some of the nuances of this case with one of the spokesmen from the Imam Jamil Al-Amin Action Network. And he is in Cleveland, Ohio, and he is Ibrahim Colvin. And I want to say to you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right. Now we want to get into the facts of the case, but for people who are not familiar with Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who is Jamil Al-Amin? What does he stand for? Give us a brief idea.
Okay, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who was born as Hubert Gerald Brown in 1943, October 4th, 1943. He's a person that was well known here in America in the Black community. He also goes by the name of H. Rap Brown. It's like a street or a nickname that he was given. If you look back on his history, he's someone that has struggled, for everything, for rights of Black people in this country, as well as for Palestinians. He's had a long history of struggle going back to the 60s in his youth. So if you look at, like, for instance, in 1962, 63, he was working in Washington, D.C., like in the anti-poverty program. He worked with an organization called NAG, which was affiliated with the organization called SNCC, which stands for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so by the late 1960s, around 66 and 67, he became the chair of SNCC following Stokely Carmichael, who was also known as Kwame Ture. So Imam Jamil continued to struggle, and he organized along with the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, who under the leadership of Fannie Lou Hamer. They went to the Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, under her leadership, to fight and struggle for the rights of Black people. They organized Black people to vote in Alabama with the what's called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization in the 60s, and which eventually led to the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. Eventually was the predecessor to the Black Panther Party. So, right. So those are some things about Imam Jamil that many people don't really know. And that, he's just been a person that's been an advocate for justice in this country, even previous to conversion to Islam.
All right. What happened on the day of March 16th, 2000?
Okay, well, March 16th, 2000, you have to go back a little bit to May of 1999. He was pulled over in a traffic stop. May of 1999, he was pulled over for allegedly driving a stolen vehicle, and then consequently, due to that traffic stop, the officer went through his wallet and saw a badge, so he also threw a charge of impersonating an officer on the arrest. So back in 1999, he was stopped for that reason and arrested. And the follow-up to that, in terms of the impersonate the officer, he was given an auxiliary police badge from the town of Whitehall, Alabama, from the mayor of the town of Whitehall, Alabama.
Okay.
In his wallet. So he wasn't impersonating a police officer, and the car was not stolen, which he produced the bill of sale from the car, at some point. So his trial was postponed due to the weather in Atlanta. So if anybody knows anything about the South, if there's any type of heavy storm or anything like that, they shut everything down. So his trial was postponed. So naturally, the court date was missed. So come up to March 16th of 2000, you had two Fulton County deputy sheriffs who were serving a bench warrant to Imam Jamil. The traffic stop happened in Cobb County, but this is county serving a warrant. And so he was served with the warrant, or they came to serve him with the warrant. And mind you, this is around 10 o'clock in the evening, which is strange in itself, but they started serving a bench warrant for a traffic stop around 10 o'clock in the evening. And they went to Imam Jamil's store. He had a store in the West End of Atlanta where he resided at and where the community was at, or is at.
Right.
And so they saw that the store was closed. They were in the process of leaving. They see someone in the street sitting in front of the store. They go back to this person and a shootout, happens. So one of the officers was killed and the other officer was wounded. And within this exchange of gunfire, the officer said that he shot the assailant. He shot the assailant. And even people in the neighborhood were reporting that there was someone going to the neighborhood houses, banging on the doors, trying to get in because they had been shot. He's saying he had been shot. So, that's essentially what happened that night. And then what unfolded from there in terms of, and even like I said, the officer not only saying that he had shot someone, the assailant, and also there being the evidence of a third trail of blood or whatever, that didn't belong to either of the officers.
Right.
So these things were known initially, and then later on, the description that the police officers gave of the assailant was that he was 5'8", 5'9". He had kind of gray or light eyes, which if anyone that knows Imam Jamil has seen him in person, Imam Jamil is every bit of 6'5", 6'6".
That's a big difference.
It's a huge difference. It's something that you can't really, you can't mistake someone being 5'8" and 6'5". You just can't mistake it, especially from some police officers, people who are trained to.
Okay,
and so,
I'm gonna ask you if we can pause just for a second.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because they're calling the adhan, and we'll pick it up in just a moment. We're
problem.
here with Ibrahim Colvin from Cleveland, Ohio, discussing the case of Imam Jamil al-Amin. Give us one moment. Okay, we are back after the adhan with our guest, Ibrahim Colvin, by way of Cleveland, Ohio. We were just discussing some of the nuances of the case surrounding Imam Jamil al-Amin. Please continue your answer.
Okay. After when the event or the incident occurred, that was March 16th of 2000, which was the eve of Eid al-Adha. So it was known that earlier in that evening that Imam Jamil had told some brothers at the masjid that he was going to Whitehall, Alabama. Whitehall, Alabama was a place that another community, like Imam Jamil was developing a community. So we were all, in 1999, he had invited the other masajid that are under his leadership for everyone to come down to Whitehall and for us to develop this community. So it was being established. So that was his reason. His reason going to Whitehall that particular evening was to do the Eid Khutbah in the morning.
Right.
Like I said, it was the eve of Eid al-Adha of 2000. So Imam Jamil was not in Atlanta at the time. That's the point. So when the shootout occurred and the officer said that he shot the assailant, the people in the neighborhood confirmed that someone was trying to get into someone's house, because he had shot. Now, when you move to March 20th, when Imam Jamil was captured,
yes,
so March 20th, 2000, and he was captured in Whitehall, Alabama. One of the agents the FBI agent that who has a really shady past, who also was charged before with murdering a young man in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a Muslim as well, I believe. He put himself on Imam Jamil's case. So he goes to Whitehall, and this is the officer who, quote unquote, found or caught Imam Jamil.
Yes.
It's on record that when he caught Imam Jamil, that he kicked him and he spit on him. So, remember at the time, those of us that were part of Imam Jamil's community, that are part of Imam Jamil's community around the country, we assumed that Imam Jamil had been shot because this was already put out there, you know, in terms of the news reports and things of that nature. So when he was captured in Whitehall, we were all expecting like either he was wounded or he was dead or something like that. And when, you know, the footage shows, like, you know, when he was captured, it's like, okay, where is he wounded at? Where they said they shot him. It was clear that they said they shot him. That's one of the first things that we heard when the incident happened. And so he was arrested and, you know, eventually taken back to Georgia to Reedsville prison, you know, where he stayed for some time before they moved him, you know, they moved him from state custody, even though he committed, they're saying that he's alleged to have committed a state crime, you know, but he's being held in the federal prison system.
Right. Okay. Now, what evidence would the prosecution say it used in order to be able to convict Imam Jamil al-Amin? What did they put forward that convinced a jury that he was guilty?
That's really a good question. Because when you look at the entire case, the crime scene essentially was destroyed. That's one thing. Even the car that was riddled with bullets, taken and dismantled. It wasn't used for any type of ballistics or anything like that. They dismantled the car. The third blood sample or DNA from a person that was not either the two was destroyed. You know, Imam Jamil did not have any gunpowder residue on him when they captured him. Obviously, whenever you're involved in an incident like that, they're going to test you for gunpowder residue. He didn't have any gunpowder residue on him. He was not shot. He was not wounded. You know, any of those types of things. The only thing that they used was the testimony of the surviving officer. And he said, and again, they had the description, again, 5'8", cold gray eyes or light eyes, whatever term he used. You know, but then you point out a man in court who's 6'5", 6'6" with brown eyes, you know, very well known in the community. So there isn't like any, when you want to like kind of link some kind of evidence that makes any kind of sense to it, there is no evidence that I can name or that's on record that just says, oh, other than the officer saying this is who shot us. There's no evidence in anything that says that, okay, you know, this possibly is, you know, is a reason why he's guilty, you know.
So you'd say it was pretty much circumstantial evidence?
Absolutely.
All right. When we were researching this case, of course, we came across the testimony of James Santos, also known as Otis Jackson.
Yes.
He actually, well, look, I'll let you tell this part.
Sure.
Who is he? What's his connection to this case? Okay.
Well, Otis Jackson or James Santos, I'm not sure which one is his birth name or his legal name. I'm not sure, but he goes by both. He's known as Otis Jackson as well as James Santos. James Santos was someone who, first of all, he confessed. We knew about the confession very, very early on.
What confession? He confessed to what?
He confessed to being the person that shot the police officers. He was saying that you know, it was him because he actually was out on probation. He had been to prison. He had a lengthy prison record. He had, you know, a lot of run-ins with the law. So he was out on probation. And he had an issue to where it was something about he didn't go to work, so he was worried about violating his probation, and you know, there's some different details to that have been explained, but happened to be in the area of the West End Masjid, and he was going to the masjid or either to Imam Jamil's store, which is the store is right down the street around like on the corner from the masjid.
Right.
So he was there at the time, and whatever happened, you know, when the police approached him, he thought that whatever he was doing, that he was going to violate his probation. And some kind of, you know, when they approached him or whatever, however it went down between them, the shootout ensued. He did what he did. And plus, the biggest part of James Santos, not only his confession to the crime, but he totally fits the description. If you've seen James Santos, he fits the description. He's 5'8", you know, he has, you know, like lighter color eyes, and you know, and he got shot that night, you know. Okay. So with all these things occurring, and with him being already on, you know, within the system, you know what I'm saying, he was worried about going back to prison. And if you receive a gunshot wound and you go to the hospital, anything like that, you're going to be questioned about how you got that gunshot wound. Mm-hmm. You know, so he had to try to gunshot wound taken care of outside of the hospital system. But because he had been shot, he had to tell his parole officer that, you know, I got shot. So he told his parole officer that he was violated for whatever crime he had previously committed. For the reason that he was out, he had violated his parole, so he was sent back to prison. But he had confessed to that shootout, to that murder from the beginning. So as early as shortly after Imam Jamil was arrested, he was already confessing, because he knew he was going back to prison anyway.
Right.
He was confessing to the fact that he did it, and he confessed. He's confessing up until this day, and as recently as as recently as 2019, he pops up on a court TV show, and he's talking about something that's totally unrelated. He's on there for something unrelated, right, to the case, but within the examination or the cross-examination of the case, this comes up, and he said, "Yeah, you know, that you know, yeah, I was involved in that shootout." And even the lawyer says, well, someone else was arrested for that. He said, yeah, Jamil Al-Amin was arrested for it. You know, and he's as clear as day. Anyone can watch this video. The video is out there. You know, if you go to certain websites, or if you Google it on you know, just Google it, you can pull up the video and watch it yourself. Watch this man confess.
Okay. Actually, I want to show a little clip of his testimony, and this is it.
Isn't it true that during that incarceration, you contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigations and told them that you had committed a murder and were involved in the shooting of a cop in March of 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, finally, I'd like to ask, what's standing in the way of a new trial? It would seem that it would be easy to get a new trial, but this information has surfaced several years ago, but still there hasn't been a new trial. What's standing in the way?
Well, what's standing in the way, honestly, is there's been a lot of pushback within the intelligence community of the United States, the FBI. If you go back to when he was in Reedsville prison in Georgia, the reason why he was moved from Reedsville prison, because the inmates began to rally around Imam Jamil, and they wanted to make him like the Imam in Georgia. So the FBI came up with this document called the something to the effect of the radicalization of inmates in the Georgian prison system. Prison system. So this basically prompted Imam Jamil to be moved from the state penitentiary to federal custody. Mind you, he's a state prisoner being held in a federal prison. So basically what happens is that the Georgia taxpayer is paying for him to be held. They're paying the Fed for him to be held in federal custody. So with that happening, he's been moved. So when he was moved initially from Reedsville, Georgia, he was moved to Oklahoma City, and then to the Supermax in Florence, Colorado. And eventually then he got sick. So they what they were trying to do, and we had to have a campaign for this, which was called execution by medical neglect.
Right.
So Imam Jamil was sick, but they weren't treating him for his illnesses. And so we had to have a letter writing campaign, a calling campaign, and things of this nature between the Imam Jamil Action Network, the Jericho movement, some civil rights activists, some human rights activists, some members of the Black Congressional Caucus at the time. So some people were advocating on his behalf, but the main thing that's keeping it from, keeping him from having a new trial, because he filed a habeas corpus was filed early on, maybe in 2005, and it was denied like 6 years later in 2011.
It took 6 years to get a response.
It took 6 years to get a response. And this whole time, so when Imam Jamil was moved into federal custody, he was put in solitary confinement, away from his lawyers, away from his family, and he didn't get out of solitary confinement until, I believe they moved him from Florence, Colorado to Butner Medical Center, and then from Butner to Waymart, Pennsylvania. And then from Waymart, Pennsylvania to Tucson, Arizona, where he's now being held, and all these federal facilities. But until he got to Waymart, Pennsylvania, I believe that was 2014. Point previous to that, he had been in solitary and administrative confinement, for those, for that time in which he was incarcerated.
Okay.
And now he's able to get onto the regular population, but his health has seriously declined, and there's been obstacles. But within the Conviction Integrity Unit in Georgia, they were developed primarily by the former mayor of Atlanta, Andrew Young, who is also a former U.S. ambassador. He was one of the people instrumental in developing the Conviction Integrity Unit, and he himself said that Imam Jamil's case needs to be looked at, one of the first cases that needs to be looked at, because he doesn't believe that he's guilty of the crime because of the evidence.
Right.
So, we're just waiting now basically on the Conviction Integrity Unit to come up with some kind of ruling, because everything has been filed. We want them to look at his case and see that he's innocent, and take into consideration this which they have never done to this day. They never take into consideration confession of a.
All right. Okay. I think we're going to pretty much leave it there. I want to thank you for coming on our program. Hopefully we'll ask you to come on again once that ruling does come forward. Is there any indication in terms of when that ruling might come down?
No, there really isn't. It's just a waiting game at this point, because all the paperwork has been filed by Imam Jamil's legal team. But any updates that you would want, you can look on imamjamilactionnetwork.org. Also, there's a website ran by Imam Jamil's son, Al-Amin, what happened, 2rap.com. Imam Jamil Action Network Facebook page. We try to keep things active and up to date. So if there's any updates, we like to, try to put them out there as soon as we possibly can.
All right. Look, we want to thank you for coming on our program. We've been discussing the case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as H. Rat Brown, with Ibrahim Colvin from Cleveland, Ohio. Jazakumullahu khaira. And we will pick it up next time. I am Bilal Abdul Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.